Is this on? Okay. So this is a new fruit that we're growing in Idaho. Just kidding.
It does look good. We all said that too.
So now we want to start talking about, I think, when you get into making change happen, how do you really do that? I mean, the ideas are great. How do you move an organization? How do you change the way people think and feel about what they do? No, not yet. So, from every level in the organization, you have to start thinking differently. And it's not, sometimes we thought, we just need to get our eligibility workers to, buy into this. That's our biggest challenge. That is the smallest challenge. The biggest challenge starts with your leadership and your management beginning to think differently. And as those levels begin to think differently, it's easier to get the rest of the organization. So, a new leadership focus. This was huge for us, but we really had to focus on different things. We had to focus on operating processes. I'll be honest with you, in central office, most everybody was centered around federal partners, policy, legislature, and I'm not saying we don't still pay attention there, because we have to. But we had very little knowledge of what actually happened on the ground. We had to go live it and breathe it and feel it and know exactly what was going on. I can almost process a case now, even though I've never been an eligibility worker, but that's the level of detail it required for our leadership team to know and understand, for us to begin thinking differently about how we worked. Root cause problem solving, really finding what is the core of the problem, not just layering more and more processes and management on top of what we already had. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. Clear performance expectations, aligned leadership, a sense of purpose, and support for your people. I think these really represent what our leadership team had to do to focus differently. And Russ shared some of the experiences even from his level that he had to do to really begin helping make this change. And I think all of us in the business office and to the manager's level really had to understand these. I know I had managers we have managers over each region, even though we're not technically regionalized, but we really expected them to be able to get in and know what the problems were, know how to process cases, know what those day-to-day operations really look like. Who's walking in your offices? How many people are walking in? Why are they there? What do they need? What are their frustrations? What are their complaints? And typically those were things that we were pushing off to our customer service reps or others. We weren't owning those problems ourselves. And leadership really had to change our focus and begin looking at those problems from a new perspective. So we had to focus differently, and then we had to find new ways to manage. This is also, I think, one of the big changes, at least for me in my own personal development, that I had to learn. And I just wanted to talk about a couple of these. You'll see a few of these up here, but number one, I want to pick just a couple out, but accept hard truths. That was really tough because a lot of times, as in a leadership position, you ask the question and you don't necessarily like the answer. And you want it to be something else, or you don't want the problem to be how they're describing it. And the fact is, you have to learn to accept that, a lot of the problems exist because we, leadership, have made them that way. And we have to be able to take those carrots out of our ears and really listen and really learn and accept what some of those hard truths are. Know that we have to make a lot of changes. We're going to have to change this policy. We're going to have to make these adjustments to the system, even though we thought that we were down the right path. Do less. That is huge. You cannot do everything all the time and be everything to all people. You have to focus on your priorities. I think one of the biggest challenges we had during the project when we took on a lot of these changes, and you'll see this come up again, learn to say no. You have to decide what's most important to you and say no to everything else. And that is so hard to do because you have so many competing demands, you have so many people wanting different things from you, and you have to learn to say no. One team, one goal kind of goes along with that. If everybody is not moving in the same direction, it's like herding cats all the time. Everybody's doing something different. Everybody's trying something new. You've got a lot of people doing a lot of things, but nobody really making a difference in one area. And then think big, start small. We're going to talk about that too. You have to have your vision, but you cannot wait until you have all the answers, everything figured out to implement something. Start with small incremental improvements. You can start tomorrow and make one little change. I know when we very first started changing this, we started with what we called quarterly releases because making changes was really tough. So every quarter, we were committed to making certain changes, and we had to plan, we had to make the change, and then we had an implementation plan for that end of the quarter. Everybody knew what it was going to be. We said no to everything else, and sometimes they were pretty small changes. But we didn't, in 2 years we're going to be here. In 3 months, these are the things we're going to change. And we started and we made a 3-month plan. And that 3-month plan was executed by every single manager in the organization. And it could have been just one little small policy change, but you have to think big, start small. Go ahead and change that. And then this is interesting, and I'm not going to walk through each one, but I'm going to walk through a couple, because I think in terms of thinking differently, we learned a lot of lessons. The first one, the old typical management way of thinking that we had was we spent a lot of time finding the perfect shiny object that would solve the problem. This is generally a technology-based solution. So we spent a lot of time, looking at nice things, doing requirements gatherings, RFPs, finding all these cool shiny tools that could solve all of our problems. Our new way of thinking and what we try to adhere to is based on our core mission, continuously define the problems. Solutions are generally process-based with policy and technology support. So don't just go chasing off after the next best thing. Don't just go buy the brand new shiny iPhone. Know what your problem is. Know what it is that's eating your lunch and focus on that. Because that, you can typically solve a lot of that problem by changing your business process. And then, when the business process isn't enough, at least you know what technology you're looking for. And you can typically find, in a very quick amount of time, a technology or policy to support that. Next one. Start by identifying all the requirements. Don't start until all the requirements are defined. That was our old way of thinking. How many of you guys have been in jam sessions? Requirements gathering, projects, where you spend months and months, right? Listing out all the requirements, all the things that you need. And the sad thing about that is, you don't always know what you need. And so you're trying to list out all of these requirements and you don't have all the answers yet. So our new way of thinking, begin immediately when you know enough to create something that is needed, even before all the requirements are known. So if you just have an inkling of what you want to change that. And I promise you, if you start, you'll learn the answers as you go. Gate reviews, old way of thinking. Gate reviews are conducted to monitor progress when scheduled or something is completed according to a project plan. So you have this big project plan and then you have reviews, right? Every 3 months or when this is done or when that is done. And so you might go a quarter or 6 months before you realize, oh my heck, I had a problem 6 months ago and I didn't know it, or nobody was here to look at it. What we find and the way that we think today is focus on return on investment reviews and conduct those regularly to monitor if the effort and progress provide value. If the value is not found, and not found almost immediately, the effort is redirected. I want to give you just one quick example of this. We implemented, or wanted to implement, a centralized mail unit where all of the mail for the entire state came into one location, and then I kind of talked about how they scan it into our document management and set a task, depending on what that mail is. Could be an application, could be verification, but they'll set a task for whoever needs to work it. So when we very first started implementing this, at first, some of the field managers that were helping with this, because they're always involved, I remember we were at the table and we were trying to decide how many staff we would need to staff this field office. And as Russ said, you know, it's not like we get new staff, so we had to redirect staff from field offices. And a couple of the managers said, I am not giving you 2 staff because I don't have that much work. I'll just do my own, you know, it doesn't take me 2 staff, it only takes me 1 staff person. So I'm only gonna give you 1. And, you know, they kind of started arguing, and over the course of the day as we were planning this, at the end of the day, I remember saying, it sounds like we are not going to have a centralized mail unit. Because if we cannot have value from it, if we do not have a return on investment, if we do not do work better with a mail unit than we do today, then why would we ever change? So let's just stick with our old processes. Oh, no, wait. I think it can be better. But that's half the trick, is making sure that you can find value from your field operations. If they have value and they have buy-in, you can make it work. If you don't see value, you should not be spending your time doing it. And sometimes that's a really tough decision to make. But why? You're always looking for that return on investment. Can I save 2 staff people? Do I get better customer service? What is better because I do this? I think this is the last one. Our old way of thinking, success is defined by completion of the project plan's task list. So you get your project plan, you have this big list, you start checking them off, and at the end of the day, it's supposed to be all better, right? You implemented a system. Life is good. What we find is success is defined only by operational outcomes. I can do better work, and I can do more work. And before, we would talk about, but I did everything I told you I was going to do. I completed my project. Nothing matters until it makes a difference in the front line. It has to make a difference to your customer, it has to make a difference to your eligibility workers. And that's how you should constantly be monitoring yourself as a manager. So I'm going to let, that's kind of, I think, thinking differently from a manager's perspective. And a lot of the lessons that we learned that changed our thinking in terms of how we would lead and manage and make decisions. Madan's going to spend a couple of minutes talking about this from a supervisor and an eligibility worker and a clerical, because we also went through a period of time where we had to redefine their thinking and their roles. And one of the handouts that we have that we'll leave with you is we did a side-by-side of like supervisors, their old roles and then their new roles, or the new ways that we needed them to think and manage. And Madan's going to walk through a couple of those with you.
So I don't know if you guys if you've gotten these handouts yet or not, but you'll get them shortly. So in the old role of a supervisor, once a month, at the end of the month, we would get these documents, caseload management reports, and I could see what staff did a month ago. And so then I would go and talk to them about their performance that happened a month ago that was really about cases that happened 2 months ago. In today's world, we're talking about performance every day because we have a system that allows us to see how much work is being completed each day. It's called business objects. And so we can see from day to day what each individual caseworker disposed of, how many cases they pended, what tasks they have pending in their caseload. That was a big change. Essentially, if you think about it, I had to come out from behind my desk. So one of the key components that I would tell all of you, I'm going to get a little bit off on what's written here, but is to know your job. Everybody thinks they know their job, but go out and really know your job and learn your line staff's job. We all get comfortable in being a supervisor and sitting behind our desk and thinking, I know that this is how my office runs, or I know that Betty Jo does her work this way. You have to really get out there and know what your staff is doing and start to make that change. You have to be the role model for change. Your staff have to trust you and trust the direction that you're going, and the best way to do that is to be available to them. Can't give them raises, you can't take away their caseloads, but you can give them of your time, your own personal time. And when they know that you have that time and you're meeting with them on a regular basis, they have an opportunity to vent and to tell you the things that they're frustrated about, then you can actually key into what the root issues are for them. It might not be the new system that's implemented. It might not be the caseload. It might just be one simple thing about the way that we see a particular customer in an office. So giving of your time is huge. And I don't think that in the past, in our old roles as supervisors, we were doing that because we were chasing the paperwork to find out what they were doing. And today, we don't chase the paperwork because we know what they're doing every day. We monitor work on the moment, in the moment. I used to make changes based off of what had happened 30 days before. Today, I make changes off of what is happening today. So we manage based off of volume that's happening in the office. Before I would just see me, my eye. It would be my office, my staff, our caseloads, and I would have a supervisor in the next office right next to me, and I wouldn't worry about that supervisor. Now we do more of co-supervision, so it's us together and our staff together, and what can we do together, and then from that we take it to the office level, and to the region, and to the statewide level also. Let's see, what are some of the other ones on here? Do you guys have anything that you're doing right now that you